You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
We're here at Veteran Etc. with Brian Schiele. He's a motivational motorcycle rider, as well as a veteran, a career veteran, military person who has devoted himself to others as well as to the road. And I connected with Brian because I got back into riding. I had a very colored and discolored past in my riding, and because I switched from one bike brand from Beamers to another, and it was great being in communication with Brian, a fellow vet to vet, giving a motorcycle encouragement. I spent last year helping my dad out, and in all that frustration in Bikertown, USA, Daytona Beach, Florida, where I'm from, as typical, I got talked into buying another bicycle, another motorcycle, I should say. And I just have had an incredible time getting back into riding. And Brian was along my 3,000 mile journey across the South, giving great pointers and great motivation, because the bike was too damn big for me, being my age and going off-road and being on road and going to adventure. So it was great because I was also able to hear Brian in regards to his rides and his way of connecting with others through his writing and giving back to the community. So I just want to hear a little bit about Brian's path. And as we know, on this show, we don't really focus on comparing one vet to another, but we're always looking at how our journeys come together. And I really appreciate Brian and the organization that he's also tied to in regards to veterans, and he'll talk a little bit about that. And, I have him here right now. So, Brian, I had an extended welcome, but because of our connection to the road, I felt like it.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. I'm glad we could, do this. We've been connected through, Facebook and Instagram for quite a while, and we've been talking about this for quite a while, and I'm glad we could finally do it.
And I was connected. Yeah.
No, I just love, I love riding motorcycles, and, I'm kind of partial to one brand, the Harley.
Yeah.
For a good reason.
It's a good reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. I think we connected through, did we connect through Prudence and Warfighter Radio Network? Were you also like tied, or were you listening, or were you on a couple podcasts with Warfighter Radio Network a while back?
I think I found out about that after we connected. I think from what I recall is, I don't know, I think I just came across you some way because you seem kind of like a kindred spirit of sorts, and in the veteran sense and all that, and I think sounds like a cool guy. And then I think I heard about all these other things afterwards through you.
Okay, great. Well, fantastic. I'm just glad that we're able to connect. And
yes.
Yeah. And can you tell me just, briefly a little bit about yourself, and also about how you got connected as a veteran to riding?
Well, as I was saying, I'm a Guard retiree. I spent 21 years in the Utah Guard. Started in the air, and I'm up in my 50s as well. Got in 1988. I actually served with both my parents at the time. In the air. My mom, my dad was prior service Navy and had a little break and just kind of felt like coming back in. And my mom, who's no longer with us,
Sorry.
Yeah.
She was in, so she was in the net. She was also serving in the National Guard.
Yep.
Oh,
And
that's great.
here's the funny
Did you
story
go to
about.
drills together, all three of you
Oh
at the
yeah,
same
all
time?
the time. Oh, we
Okay.
went. Oh yeah, we all drilled, the three of us, all every week. You know,
This is a great story. Yeah.
it was. Yeah. And here's the thing about my mom. The funny little thing about how she got in. My mom, you know, my dad at the time had been in a couple years,
Mhm.
and she was, and you know, and they went to all these little, weekend or these, couple week deployments all over the world, as the military does.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, "Well, if you're going some, meaning my dad,
Yeah.
if you're going to all these places, I'm going with you." So at age 32, 31 or 32, she signed up and went to Air Force basic training. And
God bless you. Yeah.
I know, my mom was something else.
Yeah.
She died here 11 years ago due to cancer, and yeah, I love my mom, and I wish she were still around, but yeah, it was kind of, got in with them,
Mhm.
and I was actually just a few days shy of 17 and a half.
Wow. Hmm.
It was a no-brainer. And so, like I said, I did 11 years in the air and got bored, literally, totally, horribly bored.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I got more than 10 years here. So I had this friend that I worked with at the time on, beyond the military, that was she had just graduated or was about to graduate from OCS. And I was somewhat interested in becoming an officer. So I literally, got everything together and went from the Army, or the air to the Army. And my first weekend was OCS, Army OCS.
Hmm.
And and at the time I was going through divorce with my first marriage. And suffice to say, as you and anyone else can imagine, OCS and the divorce are not a good combination. So it didn't work
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, but you ended up switching, and then you actually ended up managing the
Yeah,
unit officers as part of
yeah, right.
G1. Yeah,
Yeah, and then
that's yeah.
yeah, after a little bit after that, I got on full time as a technician in the Guard and in the G1
Yeah.
in the officer branch, as
Yeah.
an HR sergeant. And yeah, it was kind of an ironic, funny little twist that happened. And I learned a lot about the officer career path and made a lot of good friends.
Yeah.
And then in '05, I was mobilized on active duty for 4 years with what the Army was initially calling a CBHCO, community-based healthcare organization, which ultimately became I guess they've changed it now too, but ultimately what became in the early 2000s, a community-based WTU, Warrior Transition Unit. And
Yes.
I never got to Iraq or Afghanistan, but that 4 years as an HR sergeant was probably the most humbling job I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, you say that, and my sister's godmother was an Air Force nurse, and during the Vietnam years, and she was not in Vietnam, but at the same time, she was I believe she was at, I think, near Fort Lewis, and it was just all the emergency flights coming out of Japan and
Right?
Vietnam, and she was working with folks. So I
Yeah,
I don't really
this
look
was
at,
kind of the next
yeah.
step beyond that. We were here at Camp Williams, which is the National Guard training facility and all that here in Utah.
Yeah.
And we were responsible for initially soldiers in 8 states,
Hmm.
and then we quickly grew to 9. And then by the time I was done, because this whole mission lasted just almost 10 years. And by the time I was done, we were like with 11 states, and I think it grew to 14 by the time it was done. But we would remotely manage, these soldiers in all the Rocky Mountains and up into North and South Dakota and down to Arizona, New Mexico, Idaho, Montana, and I don't remember all the states now, but
Yeah.
it was, I got to see that other side, coming home.
Right. And so I want to ask you, because I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I noticed, and that's why you're a perfect friend as well as candidate for the show, is because we focus here on veteran readjustment culture,
Yeah,
not so much the culture of, hooah, hooah, hoorah, hoorah, and who yeah, who yeah. We don't focus on
right.
that. We're focused on, and that those are beautiful things. Those are great things, not to minimize it, but we like to focus here on kind of like that readjustment reality, how it transfers from one place to another. And what I noticed in my years, and I was just wondering if you could speak on this, what I noticed was that the interpersonal relationships that people have in military are so important, whether good or bad,
Very
that's going
intimate
to
too.
make you impact your life.
Yeah,
And then the
yeah,
other things are that society has a lot of myths regarding us veterans and people who served. And then the
yeah,
last thing is that it's not really a veteran civilian divide, but more an issue of a miscommunication of some sort. It's just
right.
a lack of awareness. It's not that society doesn't care about people. It's just that in many ways, I feel as though society's so busy trying to get the kids to school, trying to, pay bills and all that. So it's hard for society to be attuned to veteran readjustment. But I just, I'm going to shut up, and I want to let you kind of chime in on the three different observations I've had regarding my time working with veterans.
We need, it's part of putting the uniform away, especially in like when if you're being boarded out, or or whatever, really, there you here, and where I work at the VA, I speak to a lot of veterans all the time.
Mm.
And one thing, especially when I talk, I don't know, I seem to say this a lot to veterans who have been career veterans, or more when I have an idea that they just got out. And usually one thing I say, to give one little advice, is I say to these these ones that have just recently got out, is because we are mission oriented people, I encourage people to find a new mission, whatever it is. If I know that I'm speaking to someone that's young enough, I usually encourage them to go to school. If not, then like I say, like, learn a new hobby. Get to know, if they're older and probably a career kind of guy or woman. That's kind of, I may say sometimes, get to know your spouse more better again, whatever. But as part of this mission, find a way to reach out to another veteran, be it someone that they served with long ago, a veteran that they may, meet at the VA, a veteran from another branch, an older veteran, a younger veteran, whatever the case may be. And then over the course of that interaction, it will change not one, but two lives. I've always kind of felt that way. I'm not a combat veteran because I'm just lucky. I don't know any way to describe it. Lucky or fortunate or whatever. But a lot of what I did in my total 21 years, but in particular the last 4 years, was taking care of soldiers. And I'd
Yes.
like to think prior to that 4 years at the WTU, I knew what it meant to take care of soldiers. But what I did and what I learned and saw really hit home as to what it means to take care of soldiers.
What do you
So
think is necessary for, if there's anybody that hasn't really worked with veterans and yeah.
I'm gonna get something. Hold on. I'm
Okay. Yep. No problem.
something here. Well, an understanding. Certainly from one veteran to another, there's that understanding, but beyond the military and veteran community, just an understanding. I mean, and a realization that we as veterans, we 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 are some of the most mission oriented people out there. Meaning, we know how to get the job done, and we're going to do it in a exemplary way. And once and people just need to get over some of those stigmas of being, this whole disgruntled PTSD. I've never liked that.
Mhm.
There's this, I don't know if you've seen this out there, all these different, there's a lot of different cool, clothing brands and out there. There's one that I really kind of partial to.
Mm.
It's veteran,
Okay.
a better veteran.
Yes. Yes.
Because that little company is actually, the guy that's doing it is here out of Salt Lake. He's a veteran.
Oh, great. Get me
And
in contact with him. We'll get him on the show.
I love this guy. He's Vincent Vargas. You know who that is?
No, but the name's familiar.
He's on that Mayans MC. Speaking of motorcycles,
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna get back to that.
He's a great guy.
Mhm.
He's doing this whole veteran thing, and I don't know, I've just kind of always loved that whole idea, because I've never cared for this disgruntled veteran bullshit. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, it's a myth, and so you got that written. It's a myth and a trope, kind of like,
yes, exactly.
We have our challenges, but at the same time, I had Rudy Reyes on here recently, and he basically said, yeah, we're always seen as problems or the problem.
Right.
And a lot of veterans, we've got problems. We may be the problem at certain times. I surely was a problem to my family, but at the same time, I also became a triumph. And that's no pun on on the greatest motorcycle brand alive.
Whatever.
Triumph. I'm just kidding.
I know you
That's
are.
a cheap shot. Okay, so go on.
Well, I've always felt too that we as veterans are our worst enemy and our greatest supporter at the same time. To what you're saying.
I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying. And I think our listeners are getting a lot from that experience of what you're talking about as far as being with veterans. Now, the last theme, and you were able to handle the first two themes great. And the last theme is this veteran civilian divide. And it's okay if you believe in it or not. But my whole thing is, what are your thoughts on that? Because this is an exchange of ideas.
Yeah, right. Well, again, once people, because I hear this from my wife every now and again. She used to have this supervisor who detested veterans. And I was like, that just really made my skin crawl whenever I would hear him or hear her talk about that. And I was like, and I've never, it wasn't my place to really say something to this guy, but I just felt like, man, you are missing out. Because we are so mission oriented.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, I can remember a couple instances where they hired a guy who was a veteran, a Navy veteran, as I remember, and suffice to say, because of her supervisor's short-sightedness, the guy didn't last very long at the job. Mm-hmm. Because and as I remember, her supervisor just didn't work him as he should, as normal, because he had this whole preconceived notion that he's a veteran. And if I remember too, they probably threw out some of those PTSD things, and I was just, I wish I could have been up in a place to say, look, buddy, whatever this is that you're, this mindset that you're in about veterans, you need to get over, because you're wrong.
I love how you said it. You're missing out.
Yes. I like you. I'm sure lots of guys and women out there that are horribly successful, at doing different things, and of course there are some that, that are just so broken that they can't, and that's okay. But, in general, we as veterans are the most kick-ass, mission-oriented kind of people that you will ever find.
Yeah.
And when I hear that kind of stuff, it just really is just, I'm dumbfounded why people believe this. And again, I know why, because we are our greatest enemy, but we're also our biggest advocate and supporter.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So you're caught up with writing, but you also said that veterans can benefit from different hobbies. I know you get involved with
Yes.
fishing and you get involved with photography. But can you say a couple of these things that have helped you along the way?
Well, mostly motorcycles and just,
Uh-huh.
like I said, I learned, you know, one thing I haven't mentioned about my motorcycle experience, kind of to come back to piggyback off yours. I learned when I first learned almost 8 years ago, I was 44 years old,
Mhm.
a little later in life. And at the time, Harley was giving they were offering their basic rider class for free for veterans and military. And it just was a no-brainer. Like I was going through a divorce at the time from my second marriage. And in that class I took, there were 10 of us. 8 of us were veterans or military. And, Harley lost a little money on that. That's, $300 a pop times 8 people. That's $4,800.
Mm, mhm.
And then what I would to that at that same time, that summer in 2015, there was this ride I kept hearing about here in Salt Lake City area called the Ride to Zero. And it took place at the time in the end of August. And I had taken the class from Harley back early in July. I kept hearing about this, and it's about ending and preventing veteran suicide, and it's also a big fundraiser. At the time, there was the National Center for Veteran Studies here in Salt Lake at the U of U that we were raising money for, and now we do some other things here in the local community to do that. But I kept hearing about it, and I was like, okay, I need to go be a part of this. And my birthday's in September, so my license wasn't expired then at that time. So once I decided to commit to being a part of the Ride to Zero, I got my motorcycle endorsement, and I didn't have a bike at the time. And I had and have this friend who he doesn't ride anymore because he's a little older and has some health issues. The blind man, love that guy. He had two Harleys, and he had some. He's a Navy veteran, and he had some mental health issues and had a couple of attempts at suicide. And he was like, Brian, we're going to ride this. I'm going to ride this bike, and you're going to ride this other bike. He had I forget what the one bike was, but he had a 2007 Sportster. So that first year, I rode that, and we rode it. We rode it for a couple of years after that. And I've ridden it and participated every year. And as I showed you that one link, I'm now a board member for the Ride to Zero, and
I want to hear
this year
about
will
that.
be our eighth annual ride.
Mhm.
And we've raised we're well over $100,000 in the 8 years. A lot of it's gone to the National Center for Veteran Studies in the past.
Nice.
We are working with another organization here called Heroes Haven in Utah. It's a little week-long program to help veterans deal with all this kind of stuff. And it's like every now and again I'd like to think. I mean, I love Facebook, and I hear about all these, and I'd like to think I'm kind of media savvy somewhat anyway. But every now and again, I'll hear about some new veteran organization to help deal with all these to help veterans learn these things, an activity or whatnot. There's some that are partial to me, and in some way or another, there's Project Healing Waters for fly fishing. And then there's one here in Salt Lake called Continue Mission. It's set up by an Iraq veteran who was in the Guard here, as a matter of fact, in Utah. And I forget, this is one that I just recently learned about that I'm going to be participating in September. It's called Vet Moto Sports.
Mhm.
What it is they go around the country setting up in these autocross races.
Mhm.
And I don't even know how I came across it, but it's on Facebook.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I've known since college, I've known about, autocross. I had a college buddy of mine that raced autocross. And I was like, wow. And I went to it, and they had one opening, and I quickly got into it. So come September, I'm going to be participating in this. and it's Vet Moto Sports, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the exact name of it. But the bottom line is there, if there's an activity out there, underwater basket weaving, music, songwriting, art, some type of outdoor activity, I'd be willing to bet that there's an organization out there that was set up for veterans to learn this. And a lot of them are set up by veterans. And a lot of them, at least in my experience anyway, not all of them, but a lot of them, like Project Healing Waters, was set up by and created by a Vietnam veteran. I've always felt that our Vietnam brothers and sisters, because of what they endured when they came back, they have made things better for our generation of veterans, not just for us, but with the nation and even with the VA. And because when they would come back, I'm sure you've heard some similar stories where, they were spit on and called all these really nasty, rude names. But because of what they endured, they have made things better for our generation of veterans.
Yeah, and I would say that it's great that a lot of veteran communities come together to help each other. And I was just wondering, did we already speak about this on this episode, or did we speak about it before? But you were saying that your parents were also with you, or yeah, it's really interesting. I'd like the audience to know.
When I got in 1988. Both of my parents were in the Air Guard. My dad was prior service Navy and had a break of, I don't know, 9-10 years or something. I don't remember exactly. And he got in. And after a couple of years of, going to, doing these 2-3 week deployments all over the world, my mom said to my dad, if you're going to some of these places, I'm going with you. So at age 32, she signed up and went to Air Force basic training. And as I was saying too earlier, my mom's no longer with us. She died here 11 years ago. My mom was one awesome, strong woman, and I wish she were around today. But it's both of my parents, but mostly, in particular, my mom.
Yeah. She was a great veteran, female,
yes,
again,
20
like
years,
my sister.
20 years.
How many?
20 years she was in the Guard.
That's great. That's great to hear. And then you went to drills?
Yeah, we would go to drill together, and kind of joking between the two of us, it'd be Sergeant Mom and Sergeant Dad and Sergeant Son, just kind of, a little humor. But we'd always, we would always try to have lunch together. We always drove together. And the last when I prior to me leaving, or no, maybe it was after I'd left. I don't remember. I remember one of the last memories I have of my mom being in the Guard was when she was promoted to E7 Master Sergeant.
Right.
I was there, and me and my dad pinned it on her, and yeah, love you, Mom.
That's solid.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed. I really kind of think of myself as being purple in that whole context.
Yeah.
I have a blue base, but and my blood, I got my purple blood, but really my heart's green.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got, like I said, 10 years in the Army, and I did a whole lot more stuff in the Army than I ever did in the Air in the 11 years. And I enjoyed them both, but in the end, I really got more out of the Army, and I love the Army, and I'm grateful for it, for everything I did, and most of the things I didn't do too. Like I said, I never got to Iraq or Afghanistan, but being a part of the Warrior Transition Unit was a very humbling job.
Service is service. Let me ask you this, getting back to the writing, because I know you and I said earlier, we exchanged a lot of stories regarding writing. What would you say is the most awesome motorcycle ride that you experienced as a veteran?
Well, back in September, I imagine you may have some CVMA guys listening. the Combat Veteran Motorcycle Association.
Yeah.
Right now, they have their nationals in Louisville, Kentucky.
Mhm.
And I have here where I'm at, I don't ride with anybody anymore. But back in September last year, I rode to Louisville for
Wow.
the little group. Yeah, it was 4,048 miles. I went with my dad and
Wow.
my cousin, who's a Marine veteran, who's a part of a CVMA chapter here in Utah, 49-2. And so those guys, I mentioned CVMA for a second because those guys I have several friends that are
Mhm.
riding to Louisville right now. And I know what that ride is like. It's just like, wow. When we left, when I left one day, and my cousin, we left, he lives up in Idaho, southern Idaho. And we met in Roosevelt, where my dad lives in eastern Utah. And that first day we rode to York, Nebraska, 850 miles. And then we rode over to Iowa, eastern Iowa. We have some family there, and we stayed there with them for a day or two. And then we rode down to the Louisville area where the get together was for this organization that I was a part of at the time, and I'm no longer a part of. And there's not much I really want to say about that, despite
I
what
know.
I was there for. But it was a great ride. It was 4,048 miles, and coming back, we our second night coming back, we stopped in Salina, Kansas, there, just outside of what's there in Kansas, Fort Riley.
Yeah.
And coming home, that's all. Fort Riley is almost 1,000 miles away from my house.
Mhm.
And by the time I got home, I kind of considered it a very unofficial iron butt, because it was like 948 miles, and we did it in less than 24 hours.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
despite how the things turned out with the organization
Yeah.
that I'm known.
What is the iron butt to let
Iron butt.
the people know?
An iron butt is basically doing 1,000 miles or more, but 1,000 is the idea. 1,000 miles or more in 24 hours.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive.
Riding across the country, I went through like 9 states that I remember, and that was just an amazing ride.
Yeah.
Since then, others beyond that, I get to Sturgis, not for the rally, but to the greater, South Dakota area. I've been there twice, my wife, and she also rides.
Oh, nice.
And if you're interested, you can check some of us out. We on Instagram, we go by the Softail Schneedles.
Okay.
SCH Needles.
Okay, good.
That's kind of when we got married a few years ago, her last name is Needles and Schiele. And we just kind of joked with some of our friends that we were going to change our last name to Schneedles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go by the Softail Schneedles. We both ride, I have a Heritage Softail and my wife has a Slim, and you can check us out there. And you can check me out at Harley's and Holga's Forever.
Okay.
I love my Harley.
Yep.
And then we're going to be, my wife and I, we ride together a lot, and I ride together with, a lot of veteran friends, and I know a lot of guys from CVMA in the various chapters here in Utah, and the Ride to Zero is a veteran motorcycle nonprofit. And the thing about, I think, for the draw for motorcycles and motorcycle groups, whether it's an actual MC or a motorcycle association like CVMA or any of the others out there, I think the big draw is that a way to find and continue with that camaraderie that we leave when we uniform away.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Brian, because as you know, the MCs started
right
after World War II
right?
veterans, right? That were trying to find their place. And the first one, whatever controversy it's tied, the reality of the most popular one, the Hells Angels, they started off and probably other clubs started off with veterans, right? And even Jesse Ventura talks about being part of, I guess, the Mongols or something like that when he was younger. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting about the
And
camaraderie.
there are a lot of groups out there. It's like every now and again I learn about a new one that I've never heard of. And there are branch specific, and there are just some for veterans, and then there's like the CVMAs, specific to combat veterans. And I've
Mhm.
even heard of a couple out there that are very, very even more specific than that, like specific to your MOS. There's one I don't remember, I forget the name, but it's specific to the Rangers, the Army Rangers,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I forget the name of that one. But there's some, just like in the military, whatever the activity is, or within the motorcycle community, you got to find your home, whatever group works for you. And I'll be honest with you, you know, when you get a lot of alpha types together, there tends to be a little bit of drama, and and sometimes you may have to go from one group to another to find your home, which is okay.
Right.
And sometimes, it's okay. You don't have to ride with anybody. That's kind of where I'm at. I
Right.
said I was in a group, and it didn't. There's not a lot I need to say about it, but it didn't work out, and I left
Yeah.
it. And I'm at a point now where I I want to. I ride with. I have a lot of friends in the CVMA here locally, and I have a lot of other friends in some of the other veteran MCs and veteran motorcycle associations. Because ultimately at the end of the day, it's about supporting one another.
Yep. Yeah.
You know that that whole camaraderie. That's the camaraderie that you find in the military is unlike anything else. I'll never forget this. Here, I don't know, several years ago, after I'd been retired for a couple of years, I was sitting at this Carl's Jr. near my place here, and just down the road is a reserve center, and there was this group of force young specialists that were at lunch at that time too. It was on a Saturday or Sunday, and I was sitting there with my wife and my daughter at the time, and I just was watching these four kids, and I could tell that they had, they probably, I remember thinking that they had probably been in the unit and, come up together and, signed up together, all around the same time, because they had that camaraderie and just that, that exchange between the two of them, just even at lunch was like, wow, I miss that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are lots of different organizations out there and activities that you can find that again in, but for me it's motorcycles. And there's nothing like riding with another veteran. This ride I was telling you about, where I went to Louisville with my cousin, my greater direct family, we're kind of dysfunctional, for lack of a better term, and I don't that may be the best term anyway. But so this cousin of mine, who's a Marine Iraq veteran, he's been riding a lot longer than I have, but he just kind of came along with me and my dad on this trip, and it brought us closer. And even with my dad too. I mean, that's a whole other story too. But there's when
Just
you're out on the
family
open road,
ties.
right? When you're out on the open road riding with someone, it's a pretty intimate thing, even though it's removed from however many feet, or 'cause even when you're
You're
riding
connected.
side
You're
by side,
connected. Yeah, you're
right?
connected. Because you're feeling, I think
Sharing
you're
experience.
feeling the same danger, the same risk, the same
Yes,
wind, the same, yeah, there's just something about that. It's powerful.
and it's a great thing for marriages too.
Yeah,
I love riding with my wife. There's
great.
nothing, I have a lot of respect for a lot of wives that get on the back,
Mhm.
which is great. But there is nothing cooler and nothing sexier than when you look in the rearview mirror and you see this, your wife, or up front, or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's
Yeah.
we've got a lot of miles together. She learned just after we got together, and I love riding with her too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how do you think writing, as far as like what it's done for your mind? I know what it's done with your sense of fellowship and community, but what has it done for your
Well, there's this whole thing called wind therapy, it's very therapeutic. You just get on the bike, go 70, 80, maybe 90, maybe 100 miles an hour briefly. Not that I've advocated about that, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, you're in Utah, where in many ways you can do.
Oh yeah, we
you
have a lot
can
of
do
open
that.
space.
So
Yeah,
I don't advise this going
no,
through
I
the
advise no.
Riverside Highway in New York
Right,
City. Yeah.
right. But there's a lot to be said about wind therapy. You just get on the bike. I've got a helmet with a headset that I can listen to a little music and just have it on and slightly in the background, and just let your troubles blow past you.
Yeah, that's a great
And
thing.
when you're riding with someone, be it your wife or another veteran, there's a lot of therapeutic value in it too.
Yeah, and what kind of right now? What kind of bike do you have right now?
I have what I think is Harley's best bike,
Mhm.
2019 Heritage Softail Classic.
Mhm.
And my plate, ever since I've had a bike, my plate has said zero vet, for zero veteran suicide. I've always kind of thought of myself, in this past couple years with the whole pandemic, you've always heard about, patient one or patient zero. I've always thought of myself as veteran zero, in a way to end
Yeah.
continue the discussion about veteran suicide, and my road name even zero.
Yeah.
I take this whole, veteran suicide and everything very personal, but there's a lot of value in just wind therapy, just getting out there on your own, letting it all go, and just letting, don't be caught up in everything. And the same with the other activities like fly fishing. What I was going to show you here. This was an essay that I wrote in this magazine
Nice.
several years ago, and it was kind of got about my fly fishing experience. When I was on active duty, that's when I started to learn fly fishing.
Mhm.
And the one quote I wanted to share with you here, to kind of, there was something you'd asked, and that's what made me think about this. Let me find it here.
All right, we'll keep on talking. And so as you find it, so Brian, the reason why you think it's the best bike?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It's my second bike, and I rode across country with it. It's just so comfortable. It's fast enough, and it's here. This is kind of the funny story how I got this bike. In 2020, it's when I turned 50, and I had anyone told me that in the beginning of 2020 that I would have a new bike and wasn't going to do this travel plan, this plan I had in place and been saving all this money for,
Yeah.
I would have said crazy. I was born in Guam because my dad was in the Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd never been back.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been wanting to go there and be there on my birthday, in particular my 50th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had been saving all this money and all this. And then March of 2020 happened, and there isn't a whole lot we need to go into detail about that. But
yeah,
suffice to say, that changed our plans. And so one day around this time, 2 years ago, my wife and I because we had kind of changed our plans a little bit to accommodate what we wanted to do and all that. So we were just kind of around this time in 2020, we were like, okay, what are we going to do now? And then we looked at each other and we're like, let's buy new bikes.
Yeah.
So then we started looking around, and she quickly found the bike that she ended up with down at a Zion Harley down in St. George, Utah, which is, just 300 miles.
Yeah.
So then we got looking around, and then we found one at Red Rocks Harley, which is in Vegas. And it's connected to Zion Harley. So we there's this bike in Vegas. Could you bring it to your dealer? And they were like, yeah. So we bought it. And it's really, other than maybe like a a 1947, 1948 Harley WLH, FLH. I think it really is my dream bike. And other than when I get it paid off, it really will be my dream bike.
Yeah. So then what would you say is something as far as advice for a new rider? Like what are some basic things as far as selecting a bike in your opinion? And what are some things that are imperatives? I have my imperatives, but I want to hear about
Sure.
some of your riding imperatives for folks.
Well, I always think that taking the, a basic rider class is your first
Yeah.
thing, especially if you've never ridden.
Yes.
I prior to getting on motorcycles, I was pretty active in riding bicycles. So I kind of got that initial, that sense of it. But operating a motorcycle is way different than operating a bicycle and a car, especially if you've never, gotten anything with, manual shifting. But taking the basic rider class is a good start. Harley, you can get it from Harley. A lot of community colleges do it. I know here in Utah, one of the Harley dealers even does a women's only class, and I think you can find those out there too, among other, not beyond Harley. And just doing something new and something that kind of like military service is bigger than you. When you're out there on the road on a motorcycle, that experience there's this road here not too far from my home here that I couldn't tell you how many miles I've walked it, driven it, bicycled it, taken the bus on it over the course of my life. But I can remember not too long ago after I started riding that I was on it. I had ridden the whole length of it, basically. And it was a completely different experience being on a motorcycle on this road that I had walked and driven and bicycled and all this through all the course of my life. This was, after 40 some odd years or thereabouts. It's just a completely different experience. And, as far as a bike, my first bike was a Harley standard Softail. It was an 88 cubic inch, which is about 1400 cc, if I remember correctly. Find a bike that fits you. My wife, her first bike was a Kawasaki Vulcan 900, which was, a good bike, good starter bike for her. I think finding a bike that, because there's so many different bikes out there. There's, the Harley Cruisers and Indians, of course. And then, like a scrambler, like with your Triumph there, and then there's the sport bikes and the adventure bikes. When I first started my whole motorcycle experience, even though I took the class from Harley, I initially was looking more in like a adventure bike, BMW GS 800 or something, because I wanted to go out and ride and go fishing. And I think because of my friend, the blind man, every now and again when we would get together back then, he would always, the conversation would easily and quickly turn to Harley. Brian, Harley. And so I owe it to him if I went to Harley and the class too. But just find a bike or how you want to ride.
Great. Any last words, Brian, before
I was going to share. This was where I want to share. Okay,
go for it.
This was from this article, this little essay that I wrote in the Fly Fishing Journal.
Okay.
It just kind of starts with this little quote, the first paragraph. Okay, from a very dear friend that I served with, who is also not here with us. He died here a couple years ago. But this is one little from the opening paragraph from this article, this essay. A wise Special Forces Master Sergeant I once served with told me that veterans need three things in order to successfully transition from the military. Those three things are, he said, an education, a job, and a fishing license. So it may not be a fishing license, may not be a Harley or motorcycle, but whatever that fishing license is for you, find it and find a way to learn something new that's not formal, that's more fun, that's in a way that you can help a veteran deal with all the crazy crap that we deal with sometimes.
Well said. Well said. That's really important. Let me ask you this, because I knew a master sergeant from Utah Guard who was special forces. Was he also involved in civil affairs? Was he a very old master sergeant who was kind of
What's
like
his
in
name?
special force? I can't remember. Do you, gosh, I cannot remember him, but I just remember he was a very dedicated Mormon. He was an older looking
Was
master
his,
sergeant, but he was
was his
kind of
name
like,
Al?
he had very fair, kind of like Gregory Peck like features, kind of a lot of those
You
people
know,
in Utah. Yeah,
not knowing who you're describing,
yeah.
that sounds like this very same master sergeant.
I think it is. I think
Al
back,
Yardley.
huh?
Al Yardley is his name.
I think Yardley. I think his last name. Yeah, I think.
He
Yeah.
he died he died here a couple of years ago in a car accident.
Oh no. Gosh.
If you and I know him,
Yeah.
wow, our world just got a little smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Al Yardley.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I would see him every now and again at different things, and wow, if that's who it is,
I,
and
I'm
you
I'm
kind of yeah,
I'm I'm pretty
you are
sure.
describing. I would say the way you described him, that's kind of Al Yardley. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And this is
That's my
the
daughter.
beautiful daughter that you guys
Yes,
put on Facebook. I like
yeah,
that
that's my
connection you
daughter
guys have.
Mariah.
Nice to meet you. Hi. Great.
My daughter and I, we came into each other's lives by foster care and adoption.
Awesome. Mhm.
And that was 12 years ago with my
Thank your
second wife.
wife. Yeah, both of them.
Well, hold on. It's a little bit of a tearjerker. Like I said, this was 12 years ago with my second wife. And after we divorced in 2015, my second wife, she was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
And she basically dealt with that all in 2016. And she died in 2017 on my daughter's birthday, 8 years old.
Oh,
And so now here I am raising this beautiful, smart, strong 13-year-old girl with my third wife.
beautiful.
And my wife now is awesome and a great mom and a great wife. And I'm really grateful for her to come on this journey with us.
Yeah.
I never looking back, I kind of expected divorce to happen with my second marriage there, but I never expected her to die. But
I
we're
think
doing great.
Yeah.
The adoption is quite a journey, and
Yeah. Well, I always feel in the photos and with your wife, when I see the photos and with your daughter, I just, I just sense the love, and that's what it's all about. And I worked in
yes,
Harlem in not directly with foster care, but as a therapist to foster care parents and kids. And I was just so moved by the dedication and, of both of the child as well as the parents, like the great experiences I've had. It's a wonderful thing when you have it, there's a match. And I found those stories of matches, and gosh, I really thank you in all that you do. And yeah.
I hope that we can actually meet in person one day, Mike.
We will. We're going to find a rally point, and we'll be on bikes when we do it. So love you a lot.
Yes.
And Brian, you
Love you
enjoy
too,
your
man.
day. All right. Take care.
Ride safe.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Out
Appreciate
here.
it.
Bye-bye.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.